Okay, so John, we are so happy that you're here today. You're going to guide us through this whole thing that so many solopreneurs don't even think about, and I cannot wait to get to it. But before I do, I just want to clarify for this episode, but for all of our episodes, when we talk about solopreneurs, we are all for hiring contractors, working with contractors, partnering with other solopreneurs. Our biggest saying that we put in all of our emails and everything is going solo in business doesn't mean you're alone. And we mean that so sincerely. And so we're going to get to a lot of that today, and we're going to go through it. John, thank you so much for coming on the show. We so appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Carly. I appreciate it. I love that idea of not being alone, because as a business coach, that is sort of, I kind of become like the fake co-founder when I'm working with these people, right? Just so that they feel like they don't have to be alone. Like they want to vent, if they want to rant, if they had a bad day. Sometimes our spouses get sick of us talking about our businesses. So you need somebody else to do it.
Really?
It's so true. Well, before we dive into all of it, people are probably like, oh, well, so why is this guy going to help me figure out how to increase or decrease my workload and hire virtual assistants and everything? What is your background, and how did you get into a career of coaching people how to be more efficient with their time and get away from work so they can enjoy life?
Yeah, good question. So it's mainly probably serving the person that I once was, right? So I've started and scaled and sold 2 different creative agencies. I was a communication major in college, which I think is always short for, I don't know what the heck I want to do with my life. In high school, I was on the debate team and I did theater. And I like to talk to people. I like to work in groups of people. And then I joked that as a communication major in college, I wrote a lot of papers and worked with a lot of groups of people. So actually maybe did serve me okay. So I started a company in 2009. I moved back home through the state of South Dakota, and we had gotten a grant. It was economic development grant. It was a $15,000 grant to start our business. And to timestamp this, in 2009, our idea was, let's teach South Dakota businesses how to use this whole Web 2.0, like social media. There's all these tools they don't know about. Like Facebook had just gotten off of college campuses. Twitter was a brand new thing. And hey, YouTube is the search. Like, you should create content on YouTube. And so we were teaching people how to do that. The problem was we were terrible entrepreneurs. We didn't know what the heck we were doing. We'd go to church basements and Rotary clubs and just talk to whoever would listen. So kind of like brute force manually built that first agency. And ironically, we started a little idea underneath it. We said, what if we just do one thing really well instead of trying to do all these digital things? And our first hire was a graphic designer, and she and I started making infographics, which that was about 2011. And at that time, it was like everybody wanted an infographic, just didn't even care, just that word. And so we got lucky. We started right at kind of the Google search trend when it started to hockey stick up. And that became a company called Lemonly. So for about a decade, I ran Lemonly, which we were a visual storytelling company. So we told the stories of the world's best brands, Google and Netflix and Major League Baseball and the Green Bay Packers. And to get back to so built that company, sold that in 2021. And in both cases, both with 9Clouds and with Lemonly, I thought as an entrepreneur, it was my job to wear all of the hats. And I would just hire creatives to do the work. And then I did all the business stuff. And so I think what I learned by eventually having my own coach and then becoming a coach is, how do we spend time in like our zone of genius, right? How do we do the things we love to do? I call it an energy audit. So you draw a line down the sheet of paper. And on the plus side, what are all the things you do that give you energy? And on the minus side, what are all the things that drain your energy? And how do we get rid of those minus things? And that's kind of where a VA came in as an example.
Okay, so I want to get to the VA thing, but I'm also so curious. So we've all heard of the 4-hour work week. Thank you, Tim Ferriss, for that. You talked about the 4-day work week, which I feel like for most of us is much more realistic. How can solopreneurs achieve this 4-day work week?
Yeah, so I believe that you would probably work 4 days a week right now if you managed a better calendar and was batched your processes and tasks and was a little bit more efficient. I love this idea of theming your days. So like for me, a Monday is like a team day. So I check in with my VA, or my old Lemonly days, I had my one-on-one meetings. Tuesday, I always do sales. Wednesday, I create content. So I think theming your days, batching your stuff so they kind of fall on similar. We don't realize how much time we waste when we switch tasks, cost switching and mental load. And, I'm in Sioux Falls. I'll drive downtown to have a coffee meeting with somebody, come back to my office, like just all that stuff. And so my theory is give yourself 4 days to work in your business. And I'm not saying that maybe you're going to spend every Friday by the beach, but on Fridays, try to work on your business, right? Really elevate thinking strategy. Go for a walk, like grab a notebook and think about what you want 12 months from now, 5 years from now. And I think if you make that couple tactical switches, VA being one, you can get it down to that 4-day work week. Make the same, I would argue, possibly even more revenue because of that efficiency.
How do you hold yourself accountable to those days? Because my days are always different. They have little ones, and so I'm running around all over the place. And I like to say Mondays are like we have meetings spread out throughout the week. We have interviews spread out throughout the week. And so in theory, Joe, maybe we should be like Mondays are our interview days, and we'll clear the calendar. And because I love that concept, but as a solopreneur, we're also like ding, 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 and all over the place. So how do you hold yourself accountable to those things?
Yeah. So I'd say two parts. One is really giving yourself the permission, to build the business your way, right? I remember the first time I got like an out of office reply from somebody, and I live here in South Dakota, or we're Midwest nice. We're friendly with everybody, at least to their face. And I remember getting an out of office response, and my first reaction was like, I only check emails on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 10 to 12. And I was like, what a jerk. Like, you don't have time for and then I thought, wait a minute, like our email inboxes have just become a dumping ground for everybody else's to-dos, right? You work at a corporate, you get CC'd on emails, copied on things. And so I was like, my second thought when I paused, I was like, this is brilliant. I love that he only checks emails twice a week for 2 hours. I wish I could do that. But so giving yourself permission, and then honestly, this goes to the VA thing, sometimes taking the emotion out. Like we've all been there as a solopreneur. It might be time to send that invoice or that follow-up from a meeting, or maybe send that hard email. And we're just kind of not doing it yet because we just don't want to, or like maybe we thought that, well, we were a little bit late on that invoice last month, so maybe I'll wait a couple days. What I find as a VA, someone to delegate, it just takes the emotion out of these tasks. And so when you would email me and say like, well, I could podcast any day of the week, my VA would say, well, John is available on Tuesdays at 9, 10, or 11 to, that's when he does podcast. And at first you're kind of like, well, geez, he must be really busy and important. But then you're kind of like, well, that's pretty smart. Like that seems pretty efficient. So yeah, exactly.
Well, okay, you keep saying the magic word. I alluded to it at the beginning of this interview, but you talk about cloning yourself, which essentially is just hiring a VA. Why? How? I want to know, like, how did this clear up your calendar for you, clear up your schedule, and just change your life? Because solopreneurs, we so recommend this.
Yes, and I think we probably as solopreneurs maybe take too much pride in like wearing all the hats. Like, oh, I can be a marketer, I can write copy, I can do the thing. It's like you don't have to, right? Not only maybe do you not want to, but you probably shouldn't. And so I like to start pretty simple by like almost every job has what I call $10, $100, and $1,000 tasks. So I'll go back to my life at Lemonly as a CEO of a 20-person agency. It was a $10 task was like taking checks to the bank. And I did love doing that in the early days because I knew like, hey, we're making money, right? I'm putting checks in the bank, but I don't really need to do that. I'm not uniquely qualified to take checks to the bank. And we were actually paying our office manager like $20 an hour, but let's just call it a $10 task to take the checks to the bank. A $100 task might be our inbox, right? Like triaging a lot of emails, maybe responding. We probably write a lot of the same emails over and over. And so valuable, but maybe not most valuable. And so at Lemonly as CEO, for me, a $1,000 task was taking sales calls, maybe being on a stage at a conference or a networking event. I would even argue a $1,000 task would be like leading a team meeting internally. We're not making money, but like I always say, you build the company and you build the people and the people build the company. And so, so that's the premise of the VA is like, let's think about our task and see if you can mentally put them in buckets of $10, $100, $1,000 task. And we're going to start by wiping out those $10 tasks. That's, taking a check to the bank. That's scheduling meetings in your calendar. That's repeat, client follow-up emails, sending invoices. I love to create content, but guess what? I hate posting content. So I don't schedule any content. My VA schedules all of our content in Buffer, fills up the content calendar. So it's starting to think, like kind of freeing up that load of what are the little itty bitty things that you bounce around from thing to thing. And that's where I encourage you to start. So that energy audit, it's that minus side, those things that drain your energy. let's start there and find opportunities. And I like to say you can D, E, and A. So when you look at that minus list, you can delegate a task like a BA. You can eliminate a task, or you can automate. So automate's interesting in this AI world, but actually eliminate's my favorite. Like when sometimes we just stop doing things and you realize maybe I didn't need to do that, right? Like let's just go 2 weeks without doing that thing. And does it really move your needle? And as a solopreneur, we have to be really smart with our time.
So you're talking about like getting rid of the $10 things, $100. When you mentioned the calendar, the inbox, those could be really personal things that this VA could be seeing. So I have a twofold question. One is, how do you find a trustworthy VA, and like what kind of what kind of process do you put them through to make sure that they're trustworthy? But also, how do you get how do you train them? How do you get them to think like you know that this part of the inbox can be ignored, know that you can move this calendar thing? Let's start with the trustworthy side and how you can go about vetting VAs.
Yeah, I do think the inbox is the key to really unlocking a VA relationship. And that does take trust. You're 100% right. And there are things you can do, like Google. If you're a Google user, there's like, can't remember what they call it, like viewing access, or like there's different level assistant access. My person has my password. There's a lot of trust. We use 1Password as sort of like the key to the world of my business. And so if anything ever changes or if she were to leave, I can turn all that off pretty quickly and easily. I love the idea of like a test project. So through an interview, we did a test project with Joanne, my virtual assistant. She's in the Philippines. I have a course that we'll talk about later, but like there's a large spectrum of, you can do the part-time domestic, maybe someone in your community. If you're thinking about if your business involves maybe like going to customers or physical tasks, I would find a local person, and maybe you have to kind of throttle your way up. It could be 5 hours a week and then 10 hours a week. And I have a 40-hour a week person, but different cost structure when you're going abroad, right? So there's that. There's sort of part-time. There's a great site that hires military spouses to be virtual assistants domestically here in the US. You can go abroad, the Philippines or in Indonesia. So large spectrum. But yes, trust matters a ton. And so I think you do the security measures of technology, and then really like get to know them. And this will also answer your second question, I think, through the trust. I've spent about 8 years building this. I call it the JTM playbook. Those are my initials, but it's a Google Doc on how I like to work. And in there, I have like travel preferences. Like here's my TSA pre-check number, and I typically like to fly at this time and this seat. And then here's my email template of how I onboard new coaching clients and how I offboard coaching clients. And after I finish up a call, I do Zoom calls and take notes on my iPad. Like then we're going to grab those notes from the cloud. We're going to send this recap email. We're going to give them their homework for next month. Like that's all an email template. And so this Google Doc, this John playbook just keeps building. It's a living, breathing document. And it's just a lot of things about me. I have a wife. I have 2 kids. I'm from South Dakota. Like really trying to download your brain into a document is the goal there. And so I think to answer your question, kind of bring that all together, Carly, would be like start small, kind of work your way up. But you do have to trust. You're taking a degree of risk, but knowing that it kind of comes down to that. Like people will often say, well, doing this task myself will take me like 2 or 3 minutes. So it's going to take me 10 minutes to train you. Like I'll just do it myself. And then I ask, how often do you do that thing? Oh, every day I do that. Yeah. So maybe spend the 10 minutes to train them, because over the next month, you're going to save 300 minutes, right?
I'm curious what you think. I have a friend of mine that hires a bunch of virtual assistants, and she has them do like the Myers-Briggs and other personality tests as part of the vetting, because she's like, well, I need to make sure that we're compatible, and this test will be one of the closest things. Have you ever done that or found success with it?
I haven't done an assessment, but I feel like I'm pretty decent at like having hired a lot of people in my previous life, like at doing interviews. What I love about a test project is try to see how someone thinks. So like, take an example of so for me, I made a fake scenario of like, plan a 2-day workshop where I'm going to bring a bunch of my coaching clients together in Fargo. That's not where I live, but I said, plan that 2-day workshop, and I'm going to give you a week to do that. And by Wednesday next week, I'd love you to send me like a game plan. Just create a Google Doc, kind of an open-ended, like free-flowing type of task to see how somebody thinks. But I also want to know, can they work on a deadline? Like, do they get it done by the time I ask them to do it? And then you just get to see how they process that information. And so those are things I would potentially ask her to do, which is like logistical planning, potentially find us a restaurant and book a reservation, invite these other coaching people. And so I love that idea. And I'll pay for that, right? I'll pay you for this task. It's sort of a contractor relationship. And if that goes well, then maybe here we go. You can start at 10 hours and scale your way up.
Yeah. Also, gosh, I feel like I have a million questions going through my mind right now. But you say like booking restaurants, planning a workshop. Sometimes people are really good at one area, like QuickBooks. You said that one of the first things you were like, QuickBooks. Does it make sense to hire multiple virtual assistants? Or do you need to find somebody that can be good at social media, be good at QuickBooks, be good at making presentations?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think you can have like the more generalist type of folks. I found my person on a website called somewhere.com. And somewhere.com, I'm paying mine person full time. Let's see, $1,200 a month for 40 hours a week. So that's about $750 an hour. And what somewhere.com charges is like 30% of her annual salary. So let's just take easy math. If you're paying someone $1,000, $12K, you got to spend about $4K. So that's almost like a talent agency. But there's a site called getlanded.com. It's a newer site. And they have more tactical subject matter experts. If you want a copywriter, if you want a social media person, if you want a graphic designer, right? So like, I would even encourage these solopreneurs who your audience to think beyond. Virtual assistant kind of has a connotation, probably calendar, inbox, scheduling, logistics. But you can also, we're just talking about creating leverage, right? We're talking about buying back your time, doing the things you don't want to do, and maybe even finding people that are better at how you do it, right? I think that's a huge unlock, because like I'm always pretty quick to dismiss like my person's in the Philippines. I can guarantee you, her grammatically, she writes better emails than I do, right? She's been learning English since she was in first grade. We do a daily stand up on Zoom to plan our day. She's great. Like, I'm not worried about her English or talking to folks. So.
Well, so coming off as you like in terms of the training process and everything, do you have them kind of practice taking on your persona? Like, how do you get them to mimic you if they're doing something?
Yeah, you bet. So that playbook is a big one. Email templates. I try to give some context over the relationships of some of the people in my inbox. But I did this at my time running an agency too. I always say use the capital E word, which is experiment. So in this case, in a VA, I just say, let's draft everything. Like, don't send the email yet. Just when that email comes in, why don't you draft it? A big tool I love Voxer. So I'm kind of a verbal processor. As a solopreneur, you might be a person who's on the go a lot. You're going to a conference, you're going to visit a client. So Voxer is like a walkie-talkie app. So I'll send Joanne like, hey, I saw this email in my inbox. It's a little bit different than what we typically get. Like, could you reply to him, draft an email that says this and this, and here's what I would add. And so I give her a little bit of context. She can audibly kind of download that. And then I'll have her sometimes Slack me or just leave it in my Google Drafts. And then I'll go in and just maybe do the final 10%. So I'll call that like a 10-80-10, right? Like, I give the first 10%, I give her some direction and ideas. She takes 80% of the work, and then I come back for, say, that final 10 to just tweak it. And so then what I tell her is like, hey, let's take that template. That was a really good email. Let's add that to the playbook. And next time that email comes back, let's use that one again.
So I have a question for you just for emails, because we are guilty of using this as like part of our brainstorming. And we didn't talk about this in our pre-interview prep. So I apologize if I catch you off guard, but
let's do it.
For us, we use ChatGPT quite a bit now, just for brainstorming purposes.
Okay.
It's still us writing the emails. It's still us like writing the content, but just if we're in a rut, like, why would people now want to choose like VA to spend this stuff versus AI?
That's a great question. I'm pretty casual in my dabbling of ChatGPT so far as well, so I wouldn't claim to know it to the insides and outs very well. I probably I may use the analogy of thinking of it as like playing offense versus defense. Like, I think what I like is the feeling of going to a coffee meeting or being on a sales call with a client, or maybe coaching a client. Like, those are my $1,000 tasks. And knowing that there are emails that were triaged that I never even saw, right? Like, they were tasks or to-dos that like both came in during that call and went out, and I never saw them. We have a little bit of an end of day download process where she kind of gives me a rundown of what she accomplished. So I'm at least like aware that it happened. But I guess my answer would be like, you still have to have the mental load of triaging that with ChatGPT. Like until it's all connected, where like, I joke sometimes when Gmail's like, do you want me to summarize this email? And I'm like, it's 2 sentences long. Thanks AI. But like, I kind of have a gist, right?
Yeah.
And so like,
got this one.
Is AI awesome? Yeah, it's awesome. But some parts of it just aren't there yet. And so that would probably be my answer is like, I love feeling like, am I actually cloning myself? No, this virtual assistant is not the same version as me, and she has strengths and I have strengths. But I sometimes feel like I'm cheating because I get these extra like 40 hours a week for $300 a week type of thing.
You guys, I feel like we're talking Jetsons code or something. Like we're sitting here, you're saying that your VA is in the Philippines, but you can also use a robot to help you do. It's like, what are we talking about right now? This is all so wild. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I think let me say this because like you work with your audience is solopreneurs. I've built 2 agencies, and agencies are very like people intensive businesses. A couple million in revenue, and we create a lot of efficiencies as we grew. We worked with some of the world's best brands. But almost as we grew, we always grew in revenue. We always grew in expenses as well, right? There's a little bit of economies of scale, but like it's a very people-heavy business. And if I were to build Lemonly in 2024 versus how I did it in 2011, it would not look the same. And I just think there are new tools to Solopreneurs tool belt, ChatGPT being one of them, a VA being another, that the businesses are going to look very different.
Sorry, Joe, what were you going to say?
Besides the fact that my dog is visiting us now, I got to fix my door. I was going to ask, what do you do about the time zone issue to the Philippines? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, this was a fascinating one for me because we had some remote employees at Lemonly, and I thought that I always subscribed to that as long as we overlap for a couple hours. Like we had from Vancouver we had one in Serbia. And so she would work a couple hours, adjust her time zone. So at least we had like the morning, her end of day. So I was prepared to do that with Joanne, my virtual assistant, like as long as we can have an hour or 2 or in the morning. And she was like, no, actually, my body clock is on like US Central Time. Like my last CEO I supported was Eastern Time. But like, she's like, I've been doing this job for 5-6 years. I prefer to work at night. And so that kind of blew my mind a little bit too, because I was like, oh, really? And so that's how she likes to work. And culturally, there are lots of folks who have a similar career in the Philippines. And so even her friend, like they hang out, I guess during the nighttime because like her morning type of thing. Yeah, I don't even remember the exact time zone, but like their life is like inverted from probably our schedule, and she's great with that. So
interesting. Well, so let's say people want their because this is. I just think this all makes so much sense. Do you recommend that people because our audience is primarily made up of aspiring solopreneurs, so people that are thinking about it or have gotten started and are just trying to navigate this journey right now? Do you recommend that people get their feet wet first and figure out what they need to be delegating and where they're struggling? Or are you like, okay, you're flying solo, get a VA right now and figure this out together so you don't get overwhelmed from the get-go?
Yeah, so like in my course, the first module I just say is like, we got to figure out what we even would want to hand off to somebody before we start. I think that a lot of people maybe have poor virtual assistant experiences because they just weren't set up on what to give them. And they think, take over, and it just doesn't go well, and they don't know who to email or how to email. So I would say there is some, when I talk about a playbook, when I talk about creating like your $10 task, like there's some prep work that you deserve and that they deserve from you. And so, yeah, I would say that energy audit is a great one. There's an awesome framework a friend of mine, Dan Martell, created called the Drip Matrix. So it's in my course. It's like a 4-quadrant where you talk about like what are the types of tasks, like where should I be spending my time? Now, obviously, we want to do the things that both light you up and make you money, right? So if you think about, I love doing it and they drive revenue, I want to do those types of tasks. Some of the production tasks around those, or the fulfillment, or the invoicing, the details, like, they're important, but maybe they don't drive you, they don't light you up. So there's a lot of that prep work, I would say. anybody can be building a Carly playbook or a Joe playbook, right? Like just think about your preferences, really start building that Google Doc of things that really help you, reusable things, right? There really is no reason in today's world we should be crafting the same email over and over and over. So a great way to start doing this would be, I love loom.com. Loom.com is an amazing tool. And I call this the camcorder method. Is like when you're doing things, just open up Loom and record yourself doing and just dictate, talk about it while you're doing it. So like when I finish my podcast, I upload it here. I take it from Riverside and then I bring it over here, and then I have to upload it here because it goes to Spotify and it goes to Apple. And so Loom will then actually, not only is that a recorded video that you can then have your VA someday rewatch if he or she gets stuck, but also Loom has a pretty good AI feature that will take that audio and turn it into an SOP. And so you actually can almost kind of build your playbook while you do the tasks that you do every day. So I would just record that camcorder method.
It's so funny you say that. We're working on our SOPs with Lifestar right now, and I do one on the podcast. And I was like, I have to wait until Monday because that's my the show notes day and all that stuff. And I was like, while I'm doing it, I used Loom, and it was great. That's such a good idea.
Well, one thing I've found so funny is like, as I describe my coaching program or this VA course that I do, like people will say like, oh, so you're like a systems operations guy. And I'm always like taken back by that because no, like I hate that stuff. Like I was the communication major who wanted to just go out and if I could just have coffee meetings with people all day long, how do I get paid to do that? But what I've found is I have a high value for systems because I've learned that what they allow you to do if you have them, right? Like what I'm able to be kind of in my zone of genius, coaching, helping, speaking, consulting, thanks to this stuff. So even though it's not my natural tendency, building this infrastructure is worth it.
I just want to say, John, I'm the same way. I'm not great at building out procedures, but I have so much respect for the power. And I actually got people to help me with it that were good at it.
Yeah. And then you realize that they love systems, right? Like letting someone else do the things they love. We often think that everybody probably thinks like we do, and that's just obviously not the case.
You know, there's a book I read a few years ago. The guy's name is Les McCune, and it's called Predictable Success. And in this book, he talks about, I guess there's, I think it's 4 different kinds of people. And he has an actual online test you can take to see what kind you are. But there are visionaries, operators, and processors are the 3 kind of main ones. And then there's another one called a synergist, I think, which is kind of what you strive for. But anyway, the idea is that the operators get it done, but it's not pretty. It's not systematized. The visionaries are always doing something new, so they're never doing anything twice because they don't. It's boring, so they're always causing trouble. And the processors are the ones that basically say, okay, now we're going to put this together and make this, step by step. This is how it's going to be done every time. And when things don't go that way, they get very uncomfortable and they kind of push back. And it's a really good model. And it's you get that processor in your life. You might get annoyed by them if you're a visionary or an operator, but they will help you.
Yeah, find that person and never let go, right?
Well, speaking of which, Joanne sounds like a lifesaver for you. I'm curious, in what ways has your life changed for the better since hiring a trustworthy VA? What impact has it had?
Yeah, I think it's almost like an identity shift, right? Like because I am probably like if you think about a disc, like I'm a high I, or my in my strengths finder, like positivity and communication are my top strengths. Like because I think we often sometimes we too closely hang on to our weaknesses, right? We're like, well, I'm terrible at names, or I'm terrible at details. We've just accepted these things that we will always be this way. And I just really think you got to be careful with the words that you use, right? The tongue is the rudder that'll steer your life. And so don't claim these, we can build things that fix our weaknesses. And so how has Joanne changed my life is now I want to be a person who doesn't drop an email, who does what he says he does. When I'm in a coffee meeting and I say, you know what, Joe, I really need to introduce you to Carly. I do it. I don't just say it, go back to my life and then crap, 6 days later, I finally introduced Joe to Carly. I'll usually Voxer Joanne on my way home and say, send the intro template from Joe who I just had coffee with to Carly Reese, and like it's done before I get home, right? And it's like there's just like that's an impact, right? You all of a sudden you become the type of person who does what they say will do, and people say John adds value so quickly, and he it's like, wow, we had coffee and he's introduced me to 3 people, or he gave me this book I need to read, or this link. Because I guess what? We have a Notion template full of all my favorite books and blog articles that I send to people, so.
It's so funny because we talked about like the questions we always ask people, and you were saying you always ask what people's superpower is. And I feel like he has given you superpowers. That sounds like you can just like boom, done. Yeah.
And especially superpowers in the space that I would generally say I'm not good at. So that feels good.
That is so cool. Well, with that question, I didn't mean to segue into that, but you help people find success by freeing up their time and working with VAs. What is your favorite quote about success?
Yeah, it doesn't directly use the word success, but I think my favorite quote, and I would say it's about people who are successful, is the Maya Angelou quote that people won't remember what you said, people won't remember what you did, but they'll remember how you made them feel, right? And I think any solopreneur listening to this podcast, especially I coach a lot of services entrepreneurs, but I think this applies to products too. But like, what's the transformation, right? People were never buying infographics at Lemonly. They were buying clarity. This JPEG told a story, so that created understanding, right? And so it's like, at the end of the day, people buy with their heart. And so it's like, how do you make someone feel? And those are the things you want to be remembered by. So I always love that Maya quote.
No, I think that is great. Well, let's now pivot to you. You have a wonderful course. I want to hear more about that, where people can find it, and then just where can people find you in general?
Yeah, cool. Thank you. So I coach entrepreneurs who are on this sort of journey, maybe beyond the solo phase. So that's all at johntmeyer.com. But what I found is that customer can really, really, really benefit from this VA kind of unlock. So I created a course. It's a series of Loom videos, as well as like I have a job description on a Google Doc. I have all the links of all the websites, the pros and cons, and the cost to these different platforms where you can go find your virtual assistant and hire. I have a template to my playbook that I mentioned, redacted, some of my own personal information. So that's all in there. So it's kind of like swipe files as well as videos. And anybody listening can go to howtova.com. So virtual assistant, howtova.com. And I want to use, if you guys use the promo code SOLO, you can put this in the notes. It's normally a $297 course. It's just going to be $29. So 90% off. I just so believe in the power of this that I want to make sure your audience can take advantage.
So again, doing the math, that's kind of a good deal, listeners.
If you're talking about your hourly rate, you'll probably get it back pretty quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we so appreciate that. That is so nice of you.
You bet.
And that all sounds great. John, we just can't thank you enough for coming on the show today.
Thanks, Carly. It was fun. Great questions.
This is really, really fun. And listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. As always, we have to make the ask. Please leave that 5-star review. Subscribe to our show. Subscribe on YouTube. You get it. Please do it. We would so appreciate it. And after you do that, just hold tight, because we will be back next week for another episode of The Aspiring Solopreneur. Bye.
Bye-bye.